In the world of covert operations and service, there are no impregnable boundaries for a retired colonel. When I found out about my wife's treason and betrayal, I decided to use all my skills and resources to make her understand what real revenge is all about. A gripping story awaits you, where the lines between truth and lies become increasingly blurred. Cheating on your beloved wife is scary first and foremost by feeling. Her feminine nature perceives adultery as a kind of victory over her husband, entitling her to subsequent freedom of action. Examples: true feminine nature and history abound. There are many cases where a wife easily exchanged her husband for his worst enemy, even if he killed the father of her children before doing so. And it was easy to go for intimacy with someone who was closer at the moment when she wanted that very love. With few exceptions, love, traditional upbringing, religion, close kinship, it is easy for a woman to come into contact with another, especially when away from home and family, at a resort or on a business trip. Freedom and all sorts of willing men. The wife even becomes proud of her cheating and rarely stops after the first successful time. There is a sense of superiority and squeamish pity for her horny husband inside her. And sometimes she can't stand to brag. And how about her victories her husband may not have time for me to know? And to watch his humiliation is so sweet. I feel sorry for my husband. No one deserves that. Lucky for those husbands whose wives love, or at least respect them. In other cases, and this is the majority, wives are kept from fornication by the fear of loss of material well-being. This is the reality of family life these days. My wife and I had a passionate love affair. We met at some holiday party and never parted again. We met each other for almost a year. We understood each other almost without a word. Our hearts beat in unison. We got married early. I was 20 and Olga was 19. 9 months later, a son was born. Then a daughter 4 years later. We didn't live like that. I graduated from Polytechnic and joined the Army for 2 years. I stayed in the Army and became a career officer. The Army paid well for those days. Were to go back on a penny salary for an engineer? No, my wife didn't have to work. My money was quite enough to support my family. Right after I got married, my parents died in a car accident. The only family I had left was my grandfather Panis, and even that he lived far away from me in the Belarusian countryside. There was no way to get him out of there. My service was going quite well. After 5 years, I was sent to the Western Group of Forces to the GDR. After 1 year of service, I went to Africa as an instructor. One day on my way back from an operation, my APC hit a mine. I was sitting on the armor with my legs over the side, and the blast wave threw me 7 meters off the road. My back hit the ground and I lost consciousness for a while. When I came to, I couldn't take a full breath for a long time. In the hospital, the good doctor said I was born with my shirt on. If I hit a rock, that was it. At least a fractured spine. But that's all right. I would live. True, I specified that the consequences could be unfortunate, but they would not appear soon. So as long as you live, Captain, and be happy. I was rejoicing, along with my family. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, I went around the world. Went to Serbia and back to Africa. Served up to 45 years and got discharged for health reasons. He was transferred to the reserve with a colonel's rank. Couldn't have been what, as many might think. Colonels are divided into 3 types. Mr. Colonel, Colonel, and Hey Colonel. So here I am a Hey, with a small pension and a set of standard officer's decorations. Fortunately, in my hometown, I kept my parents' 3-room apartment. We moved in there. During the service, we saved up some money, so there was enough for the first time. It would have been all right, but the consequences of the back injury didn't last long. At first, it was just pain in my back and lower back. Then my leg began to go numb. Later, wild pains in the spine and failure of the left leg began. So in time, with quiet sadness, I became a subhuman and a part-time under-husband. I can't say that all this time Alia and I lived badly. There were all kinds of things, but there was no cheating on me or my wife. Until Alia went to work after I was discharged from the army. That's where it all started. Lately, I had been in and out of hospitals for a long time. There was a time when I was undergoing treatment and rehabilitation for almost 6 months. My wife came to see me at first, but then disappeared. My son came to visit. He told me that mom broke her leg and that she couldn't come. Alia turned up 4 months later. She said she was in rehab and so on. At first glance, her attitude towards me didn't change, but that was only at first. Olga began to travel a lot, sometimes for a long time. Several times she went to a sanatorium with a friend. She said I was not allowed and she was terribly tired. She talked on the phone for a long time, hanging up on me as I approached. I realized that Olga has someone, but my suspicions until the time was not specified. And then one day I was surfing the internet and got on my classmate, my wife's page. She had forgotten to close it. There I came across a very interesting picture. It was a picture of a happy family. Imagine that, huh? A woman with her head tilted toward a young man holding her hand. On his free hand, the man was holding a 1-year-old baby. Yes, the family stared into the lens and gritted their teeth happily. So in the role of the happy woman was my Olga. I went through her friends on the site and found this macho guy. I opened his page and was taken aback. One of the posted photos was of Olga with a baby and a happy man hugging them. The same one from the first photo. And the caption was our baby. So if you think your wife is cheating, you know it's not you. Yeah, that's a twist. Come on, Olga. She's having an affair on the side, living on 2 families and having a baby. When did she do that? I figured it out just when I went to the hospital for a long time. She must have been pregnant even earlier, but she was short and didn't notice it. And then she broke her leg. I decided to take it easy and figure it out through a former colleague of mine, a policeman. I found out all about this woodpecker who had my Olga in a relationship with her. He was 7 years younger than her. His name was Igor, businessman, no doubt about it. Been hanging out with my wife for almost 2 years now. Yeah, he got her pregnant and kind of wants to marry her. I figured that was the end of it. If a woman has another man's baby, there's no going back. I could never understand the phrase. You have to fight for love. Love is either there or it isn't. There's no other option. Fight it. Don't fight it. If you've fallen out of love, smash your head against the wall. Hashtag you can't change anything. Time kills love. While I was thinking about how I could talk to Olga about our relationship, everything sorted itself out. One evening, Alya brought her businessman to our house. They sat down in the hall and started a heart-rending conversation with me. Or rather, my lover spoke and Olga only nodded accordingly. The point was that Olga was still young and that it was a burden to her. She would end up ruining her life with me, and so on in a similar vein. I listened patiently. But when he offered to vacate the living space, my parents' apartment, and move into a home for the disabled, I politely called him closer to me. I didn't suspect a thing. He leaned toward me with a contemptuous smile of the alpha male. Olga understood everything and wanted to warn him, but it was too late. But I had a good right jab, so the macho felt it like a sledgehammer to the jaw. He rolled his eyes and flew off into the corner, banging his head against the wall. I knew I'd overreacted. It wasn't going to change anything. Well, at least it made a difference. Obviously, Alya screamed and tried to bring the lover's feelings at the same time explain to me who I was. Impotent, freak, collie, bloodsucker. I wish you were dead, you bastard. The most affectionate epithets applied by my wife to me. I listened without interrupting. I waited until her hubby returned from heaven to sinful earth and told them to get the hell out of my house. The macho man, spitting blood through chipped teeth, threatened to meet me in a dark alley and, taking his treasure in his arms, stormed out of my apartment, leaving my once beloved woman for whom I would not have spared my life, not even looking in my direction. I had lived enough, but I did not yet know then the ease with which women renounce their former love, without hesitation, in a lightning-fast and thoughtlessly cruel manner. I expected that the businessman would report me to the police, but nothing happened. Olga must have talked me out of it. The final thing that got me through was my children's decision to leave to live with their mother and her new husband. No one wants sick fathers. I drank for 2 months, constantly in a groggy state. Everything inside me burned out. When I started confusing day and night, I realized that if I didn't go to my grandfather in the middle of nowhere, I would either get completely wasted or just go crazy. In all this time, the kids never once called me. In fact, they didn't answer my calls. Nothing else kept me in this town. I stood in the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. It was pathetic. A bruised face, with thin webs of veins and bags under my eyes, long, dirty hair, and a board that looked more like a washcloth. Only a silver army badge on a lanyard, a memory of the Balkans, and a bat-shaped tattoo on my forearm reminded me of my military past. We were then pinned down in the mountains, unable to escape the natural trap. Dagger machine gun fire from the flanks forced us to defend in a nearly all-out formation, forcing us to break through time after time, taking heavy losses at the same time. We had no way out. The enemy was in front, and the steep cliffs were behind us. Soon there were only 7 men left in our already incomplete company. The fire on us was so dense that it did not allow us to raise our heads. I had the last magazine left, and the AKM's barrel was so hot it was time to light a cigarette on it. Well, Koida, it looks like we're done for. The commander called me by my last name. One more attack, and that's it. You're suggesting we give up? I attached the magazine and cocked the bolt. No point. They'll waste us anyway. Yes, they won't bother with us. The commander brought the machine gun here to me. It remained for us to sell ourselves more expensively. The day was rapidly rolling toward evening. The local objects had already begun to cast long shadows when a rustling sounded behind me and rocks sprinkled. I turned around with my finger on the trigger. An old man appeared from behind a pile of rocks in our rear. He was dressed all in black and waved his hand. Follow me quickly. There is a path here. And we slipped away under the very nose of the enemy. When we passed through the pass, the monk had disappeared, so there was no one to thank. Gone as it were. And so it was that in the nearest small Serbian town, we ordered silver tokens from a local jeweler. We had our own material, scraps of a silver pectoral cross we found in a ruined Serbian church. There was just enough for everyone. Each of the survivors wore the token like an amulet, never taking it off under any circumstances. I sighed and took the scissors. At the train station, I bought a ticket for the evening train without much trouble and gave my grandfather a telegram on the nose. A new turn in my destiny was beginning. Part 2. I returned to town at the end of March and immediately plunged into the whirlpool of events. I turned on my cell phone as soon as I began to receive messages about missed calls. The lion's share was the calls from the combat, some calls from unknown numbers, and to my great surprise, some calls from Olga. What did she want? I dialed the combat at once. Koida, we need to meet. There is a topic. Are you all right? Combat spoke with confident phrases, justifying his call sign. When and where? I also tried to be very brief. Tomorrow at the restaurant in the Plaza Hotel, about 9 o'clock. They won't let me go there with my face. I'll shave my face, spray cologne, and wash my jeans. Don't be crazy. I'm waiting. Bye. Combat passed out. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Mug is a monk. Really? What's stupid? I smiled. I wondered what he wanted to offer me. I felt great. I couldn't even believe there was a time when I could hardly move. My back didn't hurt. Only sometimes at night I woke up with pain in my left leg, as if to remind me of the past illness. I looked in the refrigerator. Empty. Nothing. The situation was normal. I took a piece of lard and a jar of pickled mushrooms when leaving for the city. I'll go get some bread. The doorbell rang. That's strange. I'm not expecting anyone. Was Olga standing on the landing? Yes, unexpectedly. What do you want? I really didn't want to see her. Yura, I'm begging you. Listen to me. She spoke softly, avoiding to meet my eyes. May I come in? Come into the kitchen, I said, letting the uninvited guest in. She sat down on a stool and for some time silently looked at the floor, collecting her thoughts. Yura, I left Igor. What was it? So much love. Did you find a new friend? I really didn't care about her problems with Igor or anyone else. I didn't have any bread for dinner. That was what bothered me the most right now. And what about our baby? I dropped it off for Igor. Yura, it's not his baby, it's your son. I saw her eyes fill with tears. Igor did a DNA test, and that's where it all came out. What difference does it make? It's not mine. What difference does it make? What are you doing here? Did you run out of money? I looked at my watch, letting you know I don't have time for idle chit-chat. You made your choice. You and the kids. What do you want from me? Yura, the boy is sick. He needs money for treatment. Oh, really? What do I have to do with it? I don't have any extra money. Yura, I'm begging you. He's in intensive care right now. The doctors say that if he's not operated on soon, he'll die. I don't have any money, In the apartment, it can be sold. Olia, you're out of your mind. Yura, we lived together for 20 years. I remember. I interrupted her. When you betrayed me when you left me, didn't you think of that? I suddenly thought that our conversation reminded me of a scene from a cheap melodrama. Yura, I'm sorry, there hasn't been a day when I haven't thought about you. She was almost crying. I've made a terrible mistake. I gave you up, our family. She kept talking, and I stared silently at my once madly beloved woman. The woman I would not hesitate to give my life for. The woman who, without hesitation, cynically gave me up in a difficult time. The woman who cut me out of her life and left me for another man. And now she has suddenly come to her senses and asks for my help. Olga denied that the time she had spent without me had made her realize how much she loved me. That only now she understood and realized that I was the only real man in her life. Her words lingered, lulled me into a fantasy that only I belonged in her heart. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She kept repeating the word like a spell, and I looked at her and imagined her kissing and caressing her lover. Did she really think I would believe her words, that she was confused, that she didn't know what she wanted, that this woman who cheated on me, had a child with her lover, left me and spent her free time with another man, and never thought of me, that she was back, because it turned out she only loved me. In her time, she found an excuse for her meanness and did not hesitate to leave me. She had enjoyed the sensual pleasures of her lover, having been in his bed more than once, and she was planning in cold blood the moment to give me one last fatal blow. God, would I turn out to be so stupid? Ready to believe all her lies, I silently listened to her remorse-filled monologue. I had something to say to her. When the heat of the moment you remembered that you had a husband, I was overwhelmed with emotion. You asked for money. I do not care about you and yours. I did not finish. Olga suddenly fell to her knees. Dear Yurachka, help me. He's just a little boy. It's not his fault. We're living in my mother's one-room apartment now. That's it. We would have sold Mom's apartment, but we have nowhere to live. Olga burst into tears. Olga, go away. I turned away so as not to see her tears. What do I care about her and her child? And try to stay out of my sight again. Olga sensed something in my voice, and without wiping away her tears, headed for the door. Yura, she'd had something else to say to me. Get out. I almost chopped it. The front door slammed. I'd never made it out for bread. Olga wandered down the street, snowed in by the first snow. She knew there was no more hope. Desperation made her want to scream, and she clamped her hand over her mouth. On the last trolleybus, Alia reached the hospital. Misha lay in a separate room, hooked up to a ventilator, entangled in tubes and IVs. By his bed, in a white robe draped over his shoulders, sat her mother. Well, Olga negatively shook her head. Yura refused to help. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Well, hello, Koida. Hello, Combat. We hugged and kissed. Then we pulled away and looked at each other. Yes, time does not spare even the best of friends. Combat had hardly changed. Only his hair was white, but it suited him. Strict gray suit with a blue shirt, purple tie, Swiss Hanover Milita, and platinum ring. On the ring finger of his right hand completed this ensemble. No give, no take. A respectable businessman riding an oil pipe. We were having dinner in a swanky restaurant on the 8th floor of the Plaza Hotel, where Combat was staying. There was a buzzing crowd, quick-witted waitresses, and an orchestra playing something Latin. Antique furniture, vintage guitars on the walls, and the lights of the great city at night behind the big floor-to-ceiling mirrored windows. Juicy chops had already been served, and we poured for the umpteenth time. Let's drink to our people without toasting. Combat took a shot glass and silently poured the vodka into his mouth. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second and exhaled. Well, what you say? He went back to our conversation. I lived through a piece of chop inside. You do not sigh like a maiden before the wedding. You were offered a case. Combat picked up a fork on the cutter and put it on the bread. The salary is excellent, as they say, all-inclusive. Full social package and everything else. Well, you get it. It's like you're recruiting me to a strip club. I laughed. Combat did not share my fun. We were quiet for a while. Well, what's your decision? Combat looked at his watch. I agree. When do we fly out? I'll call you. My interlocutor stood up, letting me know that the audience was over. The doorbell rang. Olga hardly tore her head away from the pillow. Sleepless nights were taking their toll, and she went to the door. Who is it? A courier. Olga Vyacheslavovna Koida. Is that you? Olga opened the door. What courier was she expecting? The young guy handed her a package. This is for you to sign. Olga saw her surname on the package. Who is it from? I don't know. It's my job to deliver it. Goodbye. The guy turned and ran down the stairs. Olga went into the kitchen and carefully opened the envelope. She unfolded the documents folded in quadruple. The deed to the apartment and the keys. God! She couldn't believe her eyes. Yura had given her his apartment. Olga sat down in a chair. Her legs couldn't hold her. There was still a note in the envelope. With a trembling hand, she unfolded the leaf. Tears covered her eyes, but she managed to read it. I'm not such a bastard anymore. Goodbye. There was no signature. The helicopter circled around the Volga, propelling its brown waters. Landing commanded the commander on the intercom. The helicopter tilted slightly and came in for a landing, aiming at the narrow strip of beach bordering closely on the jumble. The pilot landed gingerly on a flat surface, just barely missing the approaching trees. The engine stopped, but the blades kept turning. What's the situation? Came the voice of the platoon leader. Everything was normal. The navigator announced and opened the door. Soldiers in camouflage without insignia, holding their machine guns at the ready, began to jump out onto the sand, taking up a circular defense. The commander and I were the last to leave the helicopter. I habitually put the RPK on my shoulder and looked for a local guide. Dear listeners, thank you for finishing this reel to the very end. Now please share in the comments what you think of what Dakota did. And do you think the baby was really from him? And if you like the story, please like this video. And please don't forget to check if you're subscribed to the channel. You can do this directly below the video. Also remind you that